To me, I feel a very special guest who helped make this conference possible, and that's Al Rojas from Northern California. Al will tell you more about himself, but he was an organizer here in Oxnard about 40 to 50 years ago. He organized with the UFW. He was worked with braceros and with farm workers. As we know, Oxnard people are employed in conditions of modern-day plantation-style slavery in many cases. Out there in the heat, toiling to put vegetables on the plates of the U.S. Oxnard, like much of Central California, is the salad bowl for the United States, and people work in horrifying conditions. And Al has devoted his life to bettering the conditions of laborers, not just farm workers, but union workers. He's a seasoned organizer, and we're constantly learning a lot from him. And now in his advanced age, he's still fighting. He's still fighting on a daily basis. He's giving me calls. Hey man, are you doing this? How is this looking? He's on top of it, and we're constantly learning a lot from him, and we're working on different projects. But because of Al, we have Cruz Reynoso, and also because of LACLA Sacramento, I want to give a shout out to LACLA, the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, AFL-CIO in Sacramento, who have done a lot and brought a lot of people here who've been very active in terms of addressing the injustices, in terms of police brutality and the utter arrogance and violent nature of the police relations with our communities. So, without any further ado, I'm going to pass the mic on to Brother Al. Give him a round of applause.
I want to thank you all that I'm so used to being a rebel rouser and troublemakers. I can't help it, but I'm just going to have to get into it with you guys today. But, ¿se puede? Sí se puede. I'm sorry, ¿se puede? Sí se puede. I want to take the time to allow me and give me permission to speak to you today. To me, it's an honor, a great honor being here before you. Because you are the most important part of this whole new and old movement.
That's right.
This is a very special moment for me. But at this moment, I want to thank the families and the victims, their sacrifice and their pain for the rest of their lives. And honor. We know we have an epidemic in this state, and not only the state, but the whole country. And it's going to be up to us and all over the state of California to be able to send a message to those responsible. If not here to the governor, Kamala Harris, State Attorney General, but also to the President of the United States, Obama, and everything it stands for, a corporate government. No longer a corporate government that is censored to the people who buy the products and then fight them on the issue of GMO products, poisoning and killing our people. But at this point, I want to thank all of you, but I want to thank also all the organizations that committed themselves to get up early in the morning, 4 and 5 to travel hours, and some of you who worked hard to provide us a place to stay here. And to me, that is very, very special. But also, to me, it brings back some very, very special moments in this community. I know that there's a lot of machistas here, and we give them credit because the youth and the students are the key to this whole movement. Because some of us Some of us are on our way. And all we can do is be there for our community and with you and you with us. And that everything that we've done in our community is because of family. And to say that our family begins with that love and compassion for our young people, our young kids, and whether it be grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I married a woman that I met in the San Joaquin Valley. My parents were migrant workers from Michoacan. And the one thing my dad and my mom taught us, and I should be speaking Spanish right now, nunca te dejes de no hablar español y ensayarle a tus hijos e hijas de tu cultura y tu lenguaje.
That was wrong.
But I learned, and they finally taught me. And I was enriched by that culture and that language. So I speak it, and now my grandkids speak it fluently. One of them speaks Farsi, English, Farsi, and Spanish, fluently. But anyway, I married this woman, and I fell in love with her. And she said, "You got to come to Chicas." I said, "Chicas? What is Chicas?" He says, "You're going to find out. It's a little town on the coast called Oxnard." Okay, so I came. It became my second home. And when I got here, I saw the hustle and bustle through the boulevard when they had the Mexican theater on Oxnard Boulevard. And there was a little place not far from there off of Oxnard Boulevard where she lived called Quinto Patio. And I became a farm worker, working in the broccoli, the celery, and the cabbage, you name it, and the lemon orchards here in town. And I jump on a bus over to Colonia, and they take me out to the fields. And then later on, I couldn't get on that bus. I had to cross the railroad tracks here, over to 5th Street, over to the 4 or 5 bracero camps that were across the way. Braceros. I didn't know what a bracero was, but I found out soon. At 68 cents an hour. And pushers with varas that the braceros were working alongside of us. And they were called pushers. They push that vara in your trasero, in your back here. I don't want to be gross. But at that point, I knew that there was something wrong here. But then we had the problem of rain gear, so some guys told me in the bus coming back, he said, "We need to get somebody to help us." And there's this little guy called Cesario, something like that. And I wasn't paying attention, and all of a sudden they took an election. And unbeknownst to me, I'm just going to sleep, I'm coming back. We nominate Al Rojas to be the guy to go see Cesario. I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" I mean, that was not democratic. I didn't accept it. He says, "Well, you're going to accept it." So I went down. It was raining. I went down to near Garfield Street where the community service organization was there. And I walked in with all my rain gear all wet. I wanted to go home. So he's talking to the lady. He says, "Wait," finally comes out. And I don't want to sound sarcastic or, racist at this point. But understanding back in 1950, my mother and father, la vecina, the next door neighbor, they'd always have their babies and show me, "Mira qué bonito está tuyo, mira cómo está morenito tuyo." So we grew up with that kind of thinking, So when I saw this man called Cesario, who happened to be Cesar Chavez, I said, "What is this guy going to do and help me?" Parece Tito, So anyway, I sat down with him, and what impressed me was his little hands. This guy's got little hands. So I sat down with him, and he had jet black hair, and following with his eye there. I said, man, this guy's something about him. So he said, what's the problem? And he said, this is the problem. It's very simple. He said, you get on the bus tomorrow morning, tell the guys when they get over there at the field, don't get off. Refuse to get off. And tell them you want right here. I said, that's it? Well, not quite. He said, one, you may go to jail. One, you're going to be fired. One, you're going to walk home with no ring gear, and you're going to be all wet. So take your choice. Talk to the workers. Those are what we have. From that point, we followed through, and we got a ring gear. I'm writing a book, and in that book, all this history is going to be in there. I think it's important that we learn how to read. We learn how to document and tell our stories for our people. And then from that point, I left the fields and we went to work picking up your trash here in the city for about 3 years. And then one day I saw something in the paper. I think it was a press courier back then. And it said, there's a meeting at this community church in the Colonia to talk about crossing the Pacific Coast Highway, the railroad tracks. Crossing. Children have been killed. No crossing guard, no white lines, nothing. So, like a magnet, I went to the meeting. I didn't know what they were going to be talking about, only that they were going to talk about the little kids that got killed. They're Latinos, Chicanos, Mexicanos. So I met a man there, big, heavy-set big man, kind of baldy, big, round cheeks. And he said, "Do you know why you're here?" "Well, I'm here to learn." He says, "My name is John Soria." I didn't know who he was. But that man is responsible, and I blame him, he's long gone, rest in peace, that he changed my life. And from that point, he became like my mentor. And it's never been the same since. Later on, because we protested, and we went to the school board, and we went after the school board, we finally pushed to they protect the kids with busing them over the Pacific Coast Highway. And later on, they told me that because of all that pressure in the community, they built an overpass, I believe, over the Pacific Coast Highway. But anyway, my point here is that all this work ended up, a lot of people don't know this, and I don't think many of you do. Cesar Chavez left the CSO because the CSO refused to acknowledge him, who was against the Rosero program, because of indentured servitude and exploitation and slavery, which they're trying to bring back now. Ernesto Velarza, Ph.D. professor, activist, who many of you should know, if not, you should read the book, Merchants of Labor, and also Cesar Chavez and John Soria were fighting this whole thing about the exploitation of the Braceros. Well, with their work, they ended it. And Chavez ended up leaving here and went to Delano, and I stayed behind with John Soria. And we founded the original independent United Farm Workers Union out here in San Jose and also in Oxnard with the workers. And it was later on that we merged again, reconnected with Chavez, and when he saw me, he says, "I remember you from somewhere." I said, "Ring gear." "Ah, yeah, you never came back and told me what happened." "We won. Thanks to you. But we almost went to jail." "Oh," I said, "that's okay, you didn't go to jail, you're okay." So anyway, the bottom line is that later on, when 65 strikes out at bingo, we all merged together. The Agriculture Workers Organizing Committee from Coachella, the Filipinos, Cesar Chavez in Delano with his National Farm Workers Association, and us with the United Farm Workers Union from San Jose all the way to the Mexican border. Sometimes there were things, that came to our minds. What the hell are you doing, Rojas? Do you know what you're doing? And I say to myself, in mind, no, I don't. But there was that energy and fire about, we need to do something. I gotta do something. But we need to, bring people together. We lived in the projects for years. But anyway, it was thereafter that my life turned into going to Mexico, working with the whole independent workers union movement, and also the whole question of the issue of the rights for workers. Anyway, in Sacramento and Yolo counties, we have the whole issue of fighting for people who have been shot in the back in Yolo County also, like we heard here today. And I want to say that when we see those things, you think in terms that I have 13 grandchildren, and I have, 8 great-grandchildren, and to me those are gifts. So we have a job to do, and that job is that we need to organize, and we need to fight back, and we need to hold people accountable. And who we hold accountable, I believe, I'm not injecting anything, just my belief, is the very core of the judicial system that rots and reeks with needing to be reformed to the application of law as it relates to justice for our community. After all, they should represent the interests of people. So I say, Kamala Harris, we're coming to see you.
Yeah.
We're also in demand that there be an investigation of all the county DAs in this state and also hold them accountable. And if there's been malfeasance about violating the law or being corrupt with the law, then they need to go to jail too. Then they go to prison. I want to just finish it out here now and thank you for allowing me to speak to you and all the work that you're going to do. And this is the beginning for all of you, because to me you're all organizers. Going back to doing the work is necessary, because this is a long struggle. The man I'm going to introduce to you, I feel honored to present to you because of the work that he's done all his life. Us old little guys, okay? So I want to introduce you to a man who formed an independent civil rights commission in regards to the killing of a farm worker in Yolo County who was shot by 3 deputy sheriffs, undercover sheriffs in the back, that he's been working with us with this commission and other cases too. I want to present to you the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Cruz Reynoso.
Muy agradecido. Gracias, Sir. Pues todos tenemos mucho trabajo que hacer, ¿verdad? Pero les debo de platicar que tengo entendido que se había dicho que esta junta iba a ser de una junta anti-policía, ¿verdad? Y francamente, yo no soy de ese sentimiento, porque creo que cuando uno insiste en la justicia, cuando uno insiste que la policía se apegue a sus deberes, no es anti-policía, es a favor de la policía para que puedan hacer su obra como la deben de hacer. Por tal motivo le escribí al presidente de este colegio y le dije: "It is my pleasure to confirm that I have accepted an invitation to speak at the conference of April 27, sponsored by the Mecha students at Oxnard College. I have been asked to speak on the issues of civil responsibilities and rights which citizens enjoy in our country, in our state, and our country." And that's really the way I feel. I don't feel that I'm anti-police. I feel that we're simply asking for justice. and we're asking the police do the job that they are sworn to do. We deal, in my view, with many serious issues today. We've heard from the panel here the struggles that they've had when their loved ones have been killed. We heard from a speaker about the fact that we should expect in our society peace and love. We've heard how the poverty, those who are in poverty very often are the ones that suffer most. Poor whites, minorities, and so on. And we've heard of the terrible impact on the minority communities of the war on drugs, where even though the law seems to be equal, 80–90% of those who are sent to prison are folk of color. So sometimes how the law gets enforced is even more important than how the law itself reads. And so I must say that we have a duty to cooperate with the police. Very often the poor minorities are caught in between. Crime is more prevalent in minority and poor communities, so we need the police even more than others. And yet we're afraid that if they're called, our own neighbors will end up in trouble. I talked to a lady in Woodland, California, Chicana, who says, I have a 12-year-old son. I'm afraid every day that he'll be picked up and be accused of being a gang member. It's practically impossible to prove that you're not a gang member. I've seen the list that's used to show that a person's a gang member. I'm telling you, everyone could be identified as being a gang member. So how do you show that you're not a gang member? And we ought not to have a community with a mother concerned like that for her 12-year-old son. Some of you may or may not have read that the president of the University of California asked me to head up the study of what was called the pepper spray incident at UC Davis, where students were pepper sprayed when they were peaceably protesting. And it became worldwide news. I have a friend who was traveling in Italy, and he says, what's happening in Davis? They had a report on that in the news in Italy. You know? And so I was asked to investigate that. During that time that I met with a lot of experts, as you might guess, I particularly, incidentally, in our study, we found that the police should not have sprayed. We found that the chancellor used bad judgment in terms of what she recommended be done. We learned that those around her didn't say to her, Madam Chancellor, we think you're wrong. You ought to do this. So in a way, everybody failed in that process, from the highest to the police chief, to the lieutenants, to the officers. And were it not for cell phones, our investigators found something like 160 cell phones that they were able to put together and show us exactly what had happened. So when the police said, we did what we did because we were scared, because we were surrounded by students, the cell phones showed that in fact there was a lot of room for them to walk out of there if they wanted to. There was no necessity for them to take the students on a certain sidewalk as the only way to get them to the police cars after they had been arrested. So we were able to speak out of truth, and that's very, very important. So one of the experts I met with, I have a particular memory of. He said, I get hired by police departments to do a study of their practices. I've been hired between 50 and 60 police departments, and I go and I tell them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. However, of all of those police departments, I found only one that meets the standards that I think all of them should meet. And he had only 2 standards. One was pretty easy. And I think many officers, most officers, do that. 1, obey the law, and 2, follow the instructions that you have in your own police department. So the second one was the one that he said only one met that standard. The standard was this, that if an officer does something improper, doesn't follow the law, that will get to the supervisors in that department. He said only one met that standard. And the reason And we talked about it. The reason that that standard was not met is that, sad to say, among police departments, most police departments, there's a sense of protecting one another. So if nothing has gone wrong, you can expect truth. You can expect them to be upright, etc. But if something has gone wrong, where one of their fellow officers could end up in jail, could end up being fired, could end up being disciplined, sad to say, only one of all those met that standard. Sometimes it's called the bunker mentality. The police feel, we're against the world. We've got to protect ourselves. That's really the problem that we often have from the folk who spoke here this morning. So we have to worry about that reality. I've only lived up north in Yolo County. I lived in Sacramento County for many, many years. My wife died. A couple of years later, I remarried and we moved to Yolo County. In that community, I know that the police department at UC Davis did not meet that standard. We have a new police officer now. Most of them, the chief was fired and so on. She quit actually. So hopefully they're getting closer to meet that standard. I feel, based on what I have seen, that the Davis Police Department in one of the cities does not meet that standard. I know that the police department in Woodland does not meet that standard. I know the district attorney in that county does not meet that standard. And those are the only, we have a couple of other communities. Those are the only communities I've had contact with. None of them that meet the standard that gentleman said was a minimum standard that police officers sworn to uphold the law should meet. So we have a lot of work to do. But we also heard, I attended the workshop where a lawyer spoke who does nothing but sue police departments. And he said one of the difficult things we have is that most people in this country like police departments, believe they do very good work, which they do. And they say they just can't believe that officers would do some of the things that we've heard about this morning. And so that's a real task. I have felt in our own commission that we set up, private commission, and incidentally, I also served in the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights for 8 years. We had hearings in Los Angeles, we had hearings in New York. You remember that person who was shot 40 times in New York some years ago? The police chief still thought that was justified, even though he had no gun, even though he presented no danger to the police officers. This element of self-protection that is something that we've got to change. But it seems to me that means that those of us who have seen those things have a duty to share what we've seen with the rest of the community that really can't believe that these things happen because they happen only among a small number of officers. I've been involved with these matters for a long time. When I was a young lawyer, I started in Imperial Valley, California. And I hadn't been practicing more than 2 or 3 years when a family came to see me, and the sister actually came to see me. Her brother had been killed by a police officer. I actually knew the police officer. He was a nice guy, actually. And so when it happened, we asked for a hearing, a public hearing about what had happened. Incidentally, no public hearing took place in the killing in Yolo County. And then I asked to participate as a lawyer in that hearing so I could cross-examine the witnesses. And by golly, they agreed. And so the police officer testified, several people testified about what had happened. The family was satisfied that they knew what had happened. The killing was an unjustified killing, but it was a dumb killing. It was a silly killing. It wasn't a hatred killing. The young officer was just too green. He didn't know how to deal with a situation where he had followed the brother into a darkened alley and a struggle ensued and the brother ended up being killed. But it wasn't a hateful killing. And so the family decided to not even sue the city or the officer. Why? Because they just wanted to know what had happened. And what happens most often in these cases is that you can't find out what happened until you bring a lawsuit. And many people bring lawsuits, so if nothing else, try to find out what happened. In that case, interestingly, even though the killing was not justified, they knew what had happened, they were satisfied there wasn't a killing, a hateful killing, they even decided not to sue. More recently, in the killing, again in the back, of a young farm worker in Yolo County, there was no public hearing. Everything was quiet. There was an investigation done by the local police and the local sheriff of their own people. There was the DA's office done by a DA that worked closely with those officers, and from their point of view, everything was hunky-dory. Now, I should tell you that there was a civil trial, and yet the plaintiffs lost that civil trial. I talked to a gentleman who was in court every day, and he said, you know, what happened was that they had a jury, it was a federal jury, and two of the jurors were dismissed, so finally it was only a jury of 7. And these all came from small towns, probably people that had never had any problems with the police. And even though there were 3 witnesses, I'm told, who testified that they saw no knife, when the police said that the young farm worker threatened us with a knife, even though there were 3 witnesses who saw no knife, the police officer said, yes, he threatened us with a knife. And I think the jurors were simply incapable of believing that the police officer lied. I think that's what happened. So we have a lot of educating, it seems to me, to do. And we have to recognize that so many laws, incidentally, the laws that legislatures have passed has taken much of discretion away from judges. For example, if a person is accused of some sort of drug crime, there are minimums that you've got to send a person to prison for 10, 15, 20 years. If a person is identified as being a gang member, and the jury agrees that the person is a gang member, again, there's another several years that the person is sent to for prison. And the legislature has done that, not the judges. Sometimes judges practically cry when they see that they've got to send somebody to prison, a young person, for 10, 15 years, and they just don't think that the person deserves that. So we have a lot to do with the legislature, both federal and state. I think we have more power in the state. We've got to get organized, it seems to me, to do that. And then we have to recognize that so often the law may appear to be perfectly proper, and yet it's administered in such a way as with the drug cases, where even though the statistics indicate that every ethnic and racial group uses drugs about the same percentage, nonetheless, 80 to 90% of those who are sent to prison are black or brown. So we have to worry about that. So with a memo before me that says I've got 5 minutes, I ask a question. What are the solutions? And let me just tell you, and they're broad. I've worked with Cesar Chavez in the community service organization, even before he started organizing farm workers. He did start organizing farm workers here in Oxnard while he was still with the CSO, but not with the UFW. That came later. And we in the CSO believe that the most important thing was to have everybody, particularly young people, register to vote and vote. Those who run for office, pay attention to those who vote. Young people between 18 and 24 have the lowest registration and voting record of any age group. And yet young people have the power to change the state, it seems to me. So we've got to be engaged civically. Secondly, we don't have anybody right now who takes charge of investigating whenever there's a killing by a police officer. The Attorney General of California used to have on his website that that's one of their duties they have. They've taken that off their website. We've got to put pressure before the Attorney General of California, who's a good person, to nonetheless to reinvigorate that. We need true investigations of these matters, not investigations by the same police department, by the same district attorney's office. That so often are more interested in protecting the police than doing a true, truthful investigation. And that's got to be the federal government or the Attorney General of the state of California, and she's not doing her job. Secondly, we're at a community college. The students here, the Mecha students and others, have a perfect opportunity for a statewide organization. There are community colleges all over the state. I myself graduated from a community college. In fact, a few days ago, I was honored by the National Organization of Community Colleges. And it seems to me that you have Puente organizations, Raza organizations, I'm sure, and all or practically all community colleges. You have Black Lawyers Association. You have those who are interested in justice. There are folk, I am sure, in every one of those community colleges that will be concerned, as all of us are here for that. And we need a national group to lobby in Sacramento, a national group to meet with the local legislatures, a national group to keep statistics. You know, we always hear about how many officers have been killed on duty, and rightly should, because they do an important piece of work for us. How often have you heard how many farm workers get killed in the fields? Or in this case, how many citizens get killed by police officers? I think most Californians will be shocked to hear how many people actually get killed. And when I say most citizens, I'm talking particularly about those citizens who think highly of the police, who don't believe that anything can go wrong. And let me emphasize again that I'm not against police. I respect them. I think they often bring peace to our communities. They are very much a necessary, essential part of our community. But that doesn't mean that we need police that don't do their jobs, that don't believe in justice. And so if we truly participate, as we did in the CSO, and registering, and worrying about campaigns, on getting the vote out, and on educating one another, I think we will indeed succeed. Por eso les digo, como siempre, se debe de firmar un discurso con vivas, ¿verdad? ¡Que viva Oxnard! ¡Que viva toda la gente que está aquí hoy! ¡Que viva la justicia! ¡Que viva!
Definitely provided us with a lot of enriching insight. Our next keynote speaker is a former LAPD police officer, a private investigator in Los Angeles, California. He's one of the publishers of RenegadePopo.com and a former Ramparts Division officer who has revealed many personal experiences and injustices against officers and the general public. Alex Salazar.
Yeah.
As an officer, Alex Salazar developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as a result of a violent incident during his policing career, and is determined to help officers prevent and cope with this disorder. Alex will address the increase in police killings, the impacts of PTSD amongst officers, and the racism ingrained in the culture of police agencies.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I have all these notes here, and I've just listened to all these amazing speakers today talk, and I'm like, wow, just so amazing. But especially, it's important to discuss all this, because it is an epidemic. I worked in one of the most notorious police stations ever known, the Rampart Division. I went there as a young rookie officer from the police academy. I was assigned right from the get-go. The topics that we're going to discuss here today, the subject matters we're going to go into, are going to make people very uncomfortable and mad. I started talking about this, I would say probably, give or take, 12 years ago when I left the department. It was at a stage in my life where I thought I'd literally gone crazy. As he just mentioned, I had an incident my second year, as an officer where I had witnessed a woman being attacked and robbed downtown Los Angeles at the corner of 8th and Broadway, where I had observed her being robbed by a gang member. Supposed to go to a wedding that day, and with my then wife, didn't have no children yet, and I was just minding my own business, driving my brand new car, and as I saw this robbery taking place, I was faced with the decision to become involved, or not to become involved, and for a second I said, I'm not going to get involved, I'm just going to keep going. So what ended up happening was I pulled over. I caught the guy. He didn't even realize that I had seen him, and I snatched him up. I didn't hit him. I didn't do anything. I just grabbed him. The lady came running up to me, and I told her, call the police, call 911, and she took off and went and did that. While I was holding on to this character here, this 6 buddies showed up, okay? And, they began asking me who I was. I told them I was the police, that their friend had robbed someone. And as I'm holding on to him, I can feel him tensing up, and, he takes off running. So I go chasing after him, and as I go chasing after him, I hear the windows of my brand new car being smashed. They steal my badge, they steal my gun, and at this point, as the guy's running away, I run back, I take my police baton out of the car, out of the driver's side, and next thing I know, it's me against 6. So at this time, everything starts going really slowly. Keep in mind, this is 8th and Broadway, this is downtown Los Angeles, and I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did I get myself here to begin with? And at that point, I'm thinking, I'm going to die, or something crazy is going to happen. And so I pull out my gun. And as I pull out my gun, I tell these guys, I'm yelling at the top of my voice in Spanish and English, Policía, póngase las manos para arriba. And these guys basically told me, mátame, shoot me, kill me. So that didn't compute at that time. It just didn't make any sense to me. And as I was holding my gun, I see this woman holding this child in her arms, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is great. What if I miss this guy? And, it was 6 months after the Rodney King incident. And so I was just thinking, okay, next headlines, off-duty officer shoots unarmed men. That's what went through my mind. At that point, this lady, I had walked backwards into the middle of the street, and this woman had stopped to tell me to get in the car, they're going to beat you up. I said, no, I'm not going to leave my car. And it was then shortly after, as I'm standing there like a pendejo, just looking at everything that's going on, and a car comes around, runs me over. So I go flying up in the air, and the next thing I know, my right ankle is broken, and I'm trying to get up, and it's just like flip-flop, and I'm watching these guys break my weight. I'm holding my gun. I wanted to shoot them, kind of like in the movies type of thing, but I didn't. And so a couple minutes later, it seemed like eternity to me. I saw the helicopter up ahead, and the next thing you know, about 1 million black and whites or so, it seemed, showed up. They made a big deal about it in the newspapers. I didn't think anything of it. I was just, trying to do my job, essentially, and trying to help out the lady. The problems didn't happen, however, until I came back to the department. My partners were kind of upset with me. They were like, why didn't you shoot the MFers? That was the first thing, that they said. Why did you get involved? We're not supposed to get involved. We're supposed to drive with blinders. And so my thinking, my belief was that, hey, this could have been my mom, could have been my sister, and that was my mentality back then. So after hearing all this, all the jokes, gimpy and just teasing and what have you, I became angry, and I decided to take it out on the public. So that is where I became from a good cop to a bad cop. Now, a lot of people now, they're talking about PTSD, especially in particular to the military situation where we're having all these really bad shootings, military guys going off, killing people, going out into these little villages, killing the Afghans, the Iraqis, and things like that. There's a lot of news regarding that. Okay? And yes, I did develop this post-traumatic stress, which the indicators are reliving the incidents, having it go into your mind. And with military, with law enforcement, they do see what they call a lot of critical incidents. Critical incidents are those incident scenes where you see a murder, where you see the victims of murders, where you see children who are the victims of molestations and things like that. And so with me, I was reliving that incident all the time. And so with my situation, anytime I saw a gangbanger, I magnified it a whole lot more. And it wasn't just something that I took out with the police, it was something that I took out with my ex-wife. I remember probably about 3 months after the incident, I was having a really bad dream. I grabbed her by the hair and I started hitting her. And it was a whole different world now, is what it was going. But with that said, with the PTSD, I believe that more of the problem, you know, and being honest, because after I left law enforcement, I had to try to figure out, or rather I wanted to figure out, what the heck happened to me. Because I didn't sign up for this. And as the good judge said here, most police officers, I believe, they come on for honorable intentions. Most, okay? There's some that have bullying issues, some of them that have, you know, mental problems. They probably never should have been officers to begin with. But me, I really felt that I wanted to help people. You know, I'd grown up with watching 1 Adam 12, Dragnet. I always wanted to be the good guy. When I was a little boy, you know, playing cops and robbers, I didn't want to be the bad guy. And so, you know, it's the culture, I believe, that is the problem within racism. Now, the culture goes back, way, 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 way back, and I think it's something that no one's really talked about, and that's the issue of racism. You know, usually our black brothers have been very good in you know, talking about it, but then you get another side, whether it's Latinos or whites themselves, they say, oh, you're throwing a race card out here, you know, you're going to throw that black thing here. But racism is something that I learned as a police officer that is very much alive, okay, especially in LA. I'll give a couple of examples here. I had a very close person that I respected that actually helped bring down the police department, a white officer, and upon graduating from the LAPD, he took me to the area of Nickerson Gardens, which is in the area of Watts, Imperial and Central, and there I am standing in my nice little police uniform, about 40 pounds thinner, and we're just kind of there looking and hanging out, standing around, and then he says, look at these fun people. And I kind of ignored the remark, what do you mean by fun? And then he says it again, what do you think of these fun people? And then I finally asked him, you keep on saying these are fun people, what's the deal? And he goes, these are some effed up niggers. And yeah, and so I was kind of like, oh, you know, and then he was laughing, you know, thinking it was really, really funny. Another incident that I had was with a Latino officer working in the area of Rampart. We had run into a home that was an immigrant resident where they had, you know, taken a lot of the undocumented people, the coyotes, would take them to these little flop houses where they would keep them there for people to pick them up. You know, once they paid their money, they release them. So we got a call from a suspicious neighbor, and we went into the location. We had backup units in the back and in the front, and my partner and myself were asked to go in to do the search. So as soon as we go in, there's that pungent smell of urine, and it just stunk. Cockroaches running all over the place, and you know, old refried beans on the floor. And of course, we ran into about 20, 25 undocumented, scared, you know, Mexicans, Central Americans, or whatever they were. My partner, upon seeing all this, goes, what a bunch of dirty Mexicans, right? So I look at him like, hey, what's up with you, you know? And he goes, oh, not you. And so I was, you know, like I said, kind of taken aback, but it appeared to be after a while that this was the mindset. And traditionally, minorities have pointed the finger at whites, Caucasians, that, you know, they're racist, white people, okay? What I saw was the transformation, eventually of myself too, of becoming a racist with blacks, with Latinos, and Asians, okay? And it appeared to be that all this was caused due to a military brainwashing mindset, okay? Where you had to be part of that system, all right? And as a good judge over here was saying again, you know, we need to challenge this mentality, this state of being, with breaking what is known as the Code of Silence, okay? Code of Silence is basically someone coming forward and saying how things really are. It's not nothing new. There was an officer back in the early 70s who came forward with the NYPD, a guy by the name of Serpico. Frank Serpico, who happens to be a personal friend of mine. Being a PI, I was able to run him and, eventually track him down. He was like, how'd you get my number, But he became infamous and very famous because of the movie that Al Pacino played in his amazing story, in which he came out and basically, as an active duty cop, he challenged the system. And in challenging the system, they demonized him. They criminalized him, as they do so many other people here today. And basically, in the end, 1 week after he testified before the Knapp Commission, laying out how everybody from the bottom to the top was on the take, he was shot. His partners didn't show up. There was no backup for him. And basically, he left the country. He got a nice little pension, got an award, and that was it. But he's never been the same. And like I said, I've talked to him, a couple times here. And the guy is just totally untrusting of humanity because he basically lost faith. There was another person too that I think is worthy of mention. Is a guy by the name of Don Jackson, now known as Diop Kamau, who heads the police abuse hotline or something based out of Florida. He was also doing stings himself of law enforcement back in the 80s after his dad was assaulted by the sheriffs. Okay, and he became someone that this person that I was discussing, the Mr. Fun guy, that was very hated because he would go after bad police officers. Now, these guys who are law enforcement, a lot of them, they do believe they're doing the right thing. Okay, but most of them, they're, like how I said earlier, they have been led to believe that, what was the word the judge said? A bunker mentality. Or what I call the us versus them complex, okay? Where they tell you, it's us against them, everyone else is bad, and so we have to go after them. And the funny thing about that is when an officer makes a mistake, usually in his personal life, because what happens is, like with me, I had a spillover effect with my personal life. I was having nightmares, I was having family problems with my wife, and so they kind of stayed where they protected me for a while, okay? Things that I probably might have gone to jail for. Okay, I was drinking. I can't tell you how many times I'd get pulled over, I'd pull out my badge, and I'm like, oh, okay, go. Or they even give you a ride home. Okay, that would happen too. It goes to show you how strong that bond was. And with the police, also as the judge said, no one wants to believe that there's a bad cop out there. Okay? But reality is that there's some very sick individuals, little ticking time bombs that are just waiting to explode. And now, thanks to the amazing world of YouTube, Facebook, videos, and everything, we have these ugly murders that have been perpetuated against people like the Duenas family, Oscar Grant. It's really changed it. But this isn't anything new under the sun. This has been going on since the longest. Okay, this isn't something that is, like Daryl Gates said after Rodney King. What was he said? This is an aberration. I can't believe this is happening. And any time that this type of thing is exposed, that's kind of the mindset that they take, where they take that bunker mentality, where they are trying to protect themselves, as we did with the Christopher Dorner situation. And so, as we know now, in February this year, we had a really, really ugly incident. Okay, an ex-LAPD officer and former United States Navy officer reserve snapped. Okay, anyone remember the name of Christopher Dorner?
Yeah.
While I'm sure none of us here condone him killing innocent people, this guy wanted his brain examined because he knew something was wrong with him. Okay, that was one of the requests he asked in his long manifesto that he wrote. This attack by this former officer left 4 people dead, 2 police officers, 3 police officers wounded. Okay, and it was one of the largest manhunts in LAPD history. Okay, now again, I want to just make it clear to the media, because usually whoever's in here, there might be some media, or there might even be some undercover cops. How you guys doing there? Whoever's out there. They're watching us, people. All right? They got me in their sights too, and I'll talk a little bit about that. All right? But, you know, I'm not here to talk about anything, you know, that's for some good sensational gossip or reasons to demonize me or this conference, okay? I'm not for what Dorner did in killing innocent people, but rather I believe the system created their own monster, all right? When they treated him as they have done to other good people who wanted to be good police officers. The system, as we now know, failed him due to the inept cronyism and the good old boy club which exists in many police departments. Many police officers themselves will tell you that their stress does not come necessarily from the people they encounter on the streets, but rather from the administrators who have the power to ruin their lives. Okay? Dorner's statement, manifesto, was very true and encompassed many issues, but the one paragraph that rang very true with me was the following. This is what he said about us Latino officers, right? Those Hispanic officers who victimize their own ethnicity because they are new immigrants to this country and are unaware of their civil rights. You call them wetbacks to their face and demean them in front of fellow officers of different ethnicities so that you will receive some sort of acceptance from your colleagues. I'm not impressed. Most likely your parents or your grandparents were immigrants at one time, but you have forgotten that. You are a highly valued target. Okay? Words from the very up. Now going back to my LAPD, you know, graduation day and you know, shortly thereafter I was assigned to Rampart Division. By the way, who's heard of Rampart Division? All right, most people have. And the thing about Rampart is that the department did probably about 6 or 7 studies, okay, where they assigned different commissions. They had the Christopher Commission, then Connie Rice, and Erwin Cherminsky. They had done so many things to get at the cause and at the roots of what was going on. They made movies, they made Training Day, that was based on that. They had an award-winning Emmy series that was called The Shield. And last year, most recently, Oren Moverman did Rampart himself. It was with, what was it, that weird guy, Woody Harrelson, there you go. Woody Harrelson, Ice Cube, and Steve Buscemi, all-star cast. And so there's a fascination with Rampart, with what was going on there, with what was happening. And basically, it was police officers who had gone nuts. And working undercover myself, I became a narc. I had the opportunity to work with a guy named Rafael Perez. All right? So this guy who the whole focus of Rampart was basically based upon where these officers had morphed from good cops into bad cops. And with me, after I left the department, I was kind of determined to try to find out what was going on here. And one of the things that I learned was that the department doesn't want to know about Ptsd, all right, because, you know, it makes us a liability. You're no good anymore, all right? So what do you have? You have all these sick cops, okay, with itchy trigger fingers, some of them who are racist, some of them who have a John Wayne mentality. Okay, I would work with one guy. He's a Vietnam vet, 25 years on the job. He was my training officer, working the footbeat units in MacArthur Park, and he would not respond to any radio calls unless it was a man with a gun call. All right? And the reason, and when we did get a man with a gun call, 415 man with a gun, please respond, you know, the radio operator would say, then it would be pedal to the metal. He wanted to be the first guy to shoot someone. Okay? That was his whole thing. And a lot of these guys, they do have this military feeling, this military idea that they're out there, you know, in the jungles with these really bad people, you know, in Compton, in Linwood, in Oakland, and they feel, you know, that nobody can touch them. They have this superiority attitude. And I myself, I started developing that after I got ran over. You know, I had this concept that a lot of people were bad. And so that's ultimately what we need to change here, you know, among, you know, so many other things that we need to do. I don't believe that officers join the police department with the intent to become corrupt or to turn against their own people. I know I didn't. But it's the system in itself that corrupts the police officers, okay? The recruits that go into the academy enter with the innocent mindset that they will fight crime and justice will prevail. But instead, the cruel reality is that they learn to adapt to the environment that they now become a part of. The reality is that justice does not always prevail. Day after day, the frustrating events that allow the criminals to walk away, it takes its psychological toll on the young and the old street officers. Society has difficulty in understanding the social, psychological fragilities officers sometimes suffer from witnessing and physically being involved in what the worst of humanity has to offer. PTSD is not an excuse, okay? But you'll get some people who say, PTSD, that's why I'm crazy. That's not cool, okay? You know, because you need to deal with these issues, and that's where I believe that I've made that tremendous stride in trying to change, because it didn't happen overnight. The first thing an officer has to do if they want to become better is they need to acknowledge, hey, I have a problem, okay? And that almost involves entirely and totally reconditioning the mind, okay? Because we've been brainwashed, okay? We've been brainwashed by TV, by these TV shows, you know, watching John Wayne, you know, be a tough guy, you know, that type of thing. And, you know, I had partners that once we got our badges, you know, they were just staring at the badges. I'm a tough guy now, you know, some of these guys were saying. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got some crazy people that are going to be on the street, you know, that we're thinking this way. And so we really do need to work and focus on this because, like I said, it's a very twisted mindset. We want to believe the cops are good, but there's a lot of wickedness, a lot of bad stuff that's going on there. And again, like I said, the code of silence is something that plays heavily here. During my time as an officer, I saw people being framed. I saw people being beaten. Okay, I saw one person being killed. He was beaten to death. And he was on drugs. And I'll never forget the sound of the police baton, okay, just hitting the flesh. And I was terrified. I was like, why do you keep on beating this person? I mean, that was my mindset at the time. Why do you continue to beat this person? You know, just handcuff him, put him in the police car, take him. But no, the officers were there beating him. And then we had two other officers that were positioned just in case he was to make any furtive movement. How many of you have heard he reached for his waistband? Okay? All right, there's certain terminology, words that were taught to basically describe when an incident goes sour. It's basically that CYA mentality, okay? And so we need to work on changing that, okay? Because the police do see themselves as that. I mean, all this goes way back, and you know, really this is, I guess, a course in itself to take if anybody were to ever be interested in you know, what's going on really with law enforcement. There's a lot of spying, you know. I'm sure someone's going to talk about COINTELPRO. You know, how the police used to infiltrate, okay, the people. You know, they had Martin Luther King, right? They still do. You know, they as I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, you know, they're probably watching us right now. But that doesn't mean we should be afraid. You know, for a long time I was afraid. At one time during an investigation about 5 years ago, which caused me to stop my own investigation of doing these type of cases, I had my face, my picture, pretty picture, put on police station walls because I was accused of conspiring with gangbangers to assassinate police officers. Now, if my sister hadn't been married to a deputy chief, okay, she's a cop too, and called me, I probably wouldn't be speaking to you here today. It would have been green light time on me, and you know, I wouldn't be here discussing this. But I think it's really important that we continue to have these discussions, that we not be afraid. You know, I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, the code of silence, you know, starts with you know, breaking it here. So thank you all very much.
thank you, Alexandra, for your input, for your perspective. We appreciate your words. Before we go on to the rest of the conference, Tony's going to go ahead and give directions regarding the workshops. There were a few changes done earlier regarding the workshops changing the schedule. So Tony's going to go ahead and give more details regarding that so that you guys know where to go.